Hello, Corina.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, Ostra. Thank you very much for having me. It's exciting to be here and talk to you. Finally, it's been some time before we got together, but now we made it, so it's great.
Yeah, we made it happen. Can you give me a little introduction of who you are, what you do, and maybe how did you get into that?
Well, as you said, my name is Corina, and I, as you also said, do quite a lot of things. I'm a hypnotherapist, a psychotherapist, counselor, coach, and a trainer. And basically, I do all of those things. Yeah. But I specialize at the moment very much in corporate mental health and helping CEOs and their workforce to be less stressed and more productive. Yeah. So, and really being proactive about mental health, because people always seem to think mental health equals mental illness, which is absolutely not true. For me, I see mental health very much like, we all have, like physical health, we all have our health, and sometimes we don't feel that great. Yeah. Sometimes we have flu, but, that does not mean to say we have cancer and we're going to die. And it's very similar with mental health. We will all of us will have times when we don't feel that good because we're having a hard time. We have challenges, we have times where things are really difficult, and, we don't feel great mentally and emotionally. And this is normal, it's a part of life. And the question is how, on the one hand, how severe is that feeling of being stuck, being lost, grief, sadness, whatever that feeling is, anxiety. And also, on the other hand, having tools in place beforehand so that we can, when we go through those times, we can manage them much better. So rather than going into a downward spiral of anxiety and depression, for example, we can be in a place where we know, okay, we're going through a difficult time, but we can get through it. Yeah. And we will get through it, and this time also will pass. And that is a very big shift in your mindset and in the way you think and feel moving forward. And when you have tools and strategies in place that you've practiced before, it's a bit like, for example, if you have a building and you prepare for the possibility of having a fire in the office or in a block of flats or in your home, and you put in sprinkler systems, for example, you put those in the eventuality of something happening. So when something happens, you can deal with it. Yeah. And so it's kind of similar with mental health. We know we will happen, every bit stressful times. Every person has challenges. And so when we can cope with that and approach that proactively, then when the time comes, we deal with it much better. That doesn't mean to say we will not have heart, we won't feel sadness, we won't feel anxiety, we won't feel worry. Of course, we still feel those things because we're human, and that's part of being human. But it means that we can cope with it better than if we're completely unprepared, have no tools, no strategies at all, no knowledge, no awareness, and we just go into this deep hole of whatever it might be.
You said before that about the level of how stuck you are, because I think like when it comes to finding tools, you have to be aware of what is the level that you are, like how stuck are you, or how down the spiral have you gone? Is there like a way how you can measure them? Because I think for one person, something that is like they might be at the same level, but for somebody it's something like that they feel really stuck. For somebody else it might be like I don't really feel that stuck.
Absolutely. And the thing is really, it is exactly like you've just described it. It's a very individual thing, because for one person, the same situation might be incredibly stressful. And for the other, like, for example, let's say, for example, let's say, for example, we both work in the same office, and something terrible happens to the boss. I love the boss. To you, he's just a boss. Yeah. So to me, that might be an absolute tragedy, and it might be terrible. And to you, it might be neutral. You'll say, okay, that's really sad, it's terrible, but that's as far as it goes.
It won't affect me that much.
Exactly, and I could be devastated. Now, it's the same, we're in the same situation, the same event, but it's different for the both of us. And so how people respond to any event is very individual. And really the only way to measure that is by how you feel. It's subjective. I think there is no real objective way of measuring that type of thing, because, even on a day-to-day basis, you yourself might feel different. The way you respond today might be different to the way you respond tomorrow, depending on how you feel, depending on circumstances, depending on your environment, depending on so many things. So I think there is no sort of objective measurement of how people feel, really.
Yeah, I think that might be where helping people, let's say in a workplace with mental health, that's where it might become challenging, because going to everybody individually, that is really time consuming. And I think a lot of times people even brush it off, that they're like, well, it's not that important, I can just power through and just go with it, or like whatever. Or even like your boss might expect you to do that. But like, what would be like good way how to approach it where you are aware of your employees' mental state? Because I think that is one of the most important things for their performance, because if they are not in a good mental state, or place, they will not be able to perform that well.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting, because if you have, for example, if you have an office and you have a meeting and there's 10 people sitting around the table, will have a mental health issue at any given point. So that means that what they bring to the table in that meeting, they cannot perform at their best. They cannot give the knowledge that they actually have, because they are in a stressful situation. And when I say stressful situation, I really mean the fight and flight, which you obviously know about, the fight and flight response. So 6 out of 10 of those people that you are expecting to perform, to give knowledge, to do whatever, aren't able to do that because they are overworked, they're stressed, they've just had a fight with their partner at home, with their colleague at work, whatever the case is. And that was pre-COVID figures. Yeah. And that does not take into consideration CEOs who are 50% more likely than the general population to struggle with the mental health issue. Yeah. So, addressing that is really, really important. And as you quite rightly said, is how do you do that when you've got so many different people in a work environment? And I think, well, one answer is, as I've already mentioned, is having those proactive strategies whereby people are educated about what mental health means, but also having systems in place within the company whereby people can maybe take breaks, where people can check in on each other without having to go into all your personal, I think a lot of people worry, and this is kind of where the stigma comes from, is that they have to tell everybody their deepest, darkest secrets. And it doesn't have to be like that, It can just be something as simple as having a code work within the organization, for example, saying, hey, Elstra, are you on top of your week? Yeah, I'm cool, everything's fine. And that's great. But you might say, well, not so much. And I could say, well, okay, do you need some help? Do you need support? Do you need a check? What can I do? or are you okay? So it can be something as simple as that. And again, that does not mean going into all your deepest, darkest feelings. And, it's a simple strategy whereby people know more or less what's going on for somebody else and can be aware, like, you're not having a great day. In fact, my LinkedIn post today, do you know today is International Traffic Light Day? I didn't know that. So anyway, I did a post about that today. And what I was thinking is, what happens if you have like a traffic light system? Because, all the countries around the world now are adopting this traffic light system for travel regulations. So what happens if we did something like that around mental health in the workplace, whereby you've got, in front of the office or your office, you could have like, I don't know, a post-it, different color post-its. You put a post on the wall and you go, or on your door or whatever, it's red. It's like, today is not a great day, leave me alone. And then again, within that, you can, on an individual basis, and this comes down to knowing your staff, knowing the people that you work with, knowing your colleagues, knowing your teams, but, and having those conversations. So you could say, okay, guys, for me, red means I just don't want to talk to anybody. Just leave me alone for 5 minutes or leave me alone for half a day and I'll be fine. For somebody else like me, I might say, for example, okay, if I'm on red, it means I just want to have a chat to somebody. Can somebody come and talk to me? So you can have those type of systems which work and again, fit into individual needs quite nicely. So yeah, I was thinking about that just yesterday because I was writing this post. So I was thinking, I think maybe a traffic light system in an organization around mental health might actually be quite a good thing.
I think like even with this, when you were saying that if a, let's say if a, I don't want to say a boss, like let's say a leader would check on you, I think you have to be in really safe space to actually, or like have a really specific culture where you can say that you don't feel that well, because I think a lot of times you're expected to be on point, and if you're not, you're being judged or like looked down or whatever. But like what would you say are really like are important things to keep in mind when you build that culture to actually create that safe space when it's okay if you don't feel okay?
Well, actually, I think that's why it's so important for the process to start at the top. For the leaders to actually first, go through training, go through the process, whatever, so they can actually experience the benefit of, having, for example, a coach in specifically around mental health. Because the thing is, when we are not, and you said it earlier yourself, when we are not in a good place mentally, we can't perform, we can't get the results that we want and are expected to get. So, I think starting with the leadership, they need to become aware for themselves, first of all, and then they need to start implementing those processes for themselves. So let's say, for example, they go through a training program or they go through a coaching program, which they then bring into the organization so that it can then become part of the company strategy and the company culture. And again, there's been research on the ROI of investing in mental health programs. And the research showed that if you invest, for every dollar invested in reactive mental health, you have a ROI of $3. However, for every dollar that you invest in organization-wide awareness and culture and strategy, you have an ROI of $6 per every dollar invested. So it's an ROI of 6 times. So that just shows you how important it is really to be proactive. So reactive is good. If somebody's struggling, definitely get them help, get them support. but how much better will it be if you can get in there before it gets to that level? And how much is that going to save you in cost? Because if you go back to the figure of the six out of 10, if 6 out of 10 people are struggling and you're trying to catch up with that, what is the cost of that, as opposed to they don't actually get to that point?
Yeah. Actually, as you were speaking, I was thinking about if you had approached some CEOs that are like, well, I don't really need it, but then when you gave this data, I'm like, well, it's a good proof that you actually need this, and it's good for your business. Because I think a lot of times when you approach somebody, they're more interested in like the business side of it, not as much the mental health. They're like, well, it's not that important. But then when you actually show the data, it actually shows how important that is.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. It is so important. And I agree with you. I think a lot of CEOs and leaders think it doesn't really matter, but once they start to see the cost of what it is costing them, because if somebody is off for illness, and most of those illnesses are mental health illnesses, that costs them days off of that particular person, but it also has a knock-on effect on the entire business. So they might need to bring in, substitute people to fill that spot. There's a whole knock-on effect around that. So, and again, I come back to this point of, if it doesn't get to that in the first place, that means people are performing better because they're feeling better, so they can perform at their best, which means the company is able to get better results and higher profits.
Yeah.
So when
go ahead.
And when leaders start to see the benefit of the cost and that it's affecting their profits, then I think that's when they start to see how important it actually is.
They can't not see it.
Exactly.
The interesting thing is that, like, as you said before, I think you said that entrepreneurs or CEOs themselves have like 50% more anxiety and stress. And it's ironic that in a way they don't see it as important. Like, is there a reason why they don't see it as important? Like, is it that they're used to it, or like, what would you say? Like, what would you like think is the reason for that? Because they have more stress and anxiety, so they should be able to understand the importance of it.
I think probably the biggest reason is that they don't realize it. They think this is normal. It's just part of the job. And it's also part of the way that we've all been socialized. If you want to be successful, you've got to work hard. Yeah. And if working hard means like working extra hours, working weekends, exactly, no sleep, being available 24/7 on your phone, on your email. And they consider this to be part of the job. That's what you have to do in order to be successful. That's just the job. What do you do? And so they don't realize that actually it is an issue and it's not normal, and it's up to them to actually stand back and take more control over their own environment and also in many ways of their business.
Yeah. Do you know what
and
helps
I think
them to realize that it's not normal?
Education.
Yeah.
Really. And just trying to get them to realize that that what they're experiencing, lack of sleep, anxiety, a lot of them, and most of them will self-medicate through things like food, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, to try and calm down, to try and relax. Well, all of those things we don't need. Humans, we weren't made to need all of those things to calm us down. Yeah. We actually can do all of that naturally if we know how, if we take back control of our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and environment. And and I think it's also getting people to understand that they have more control over these things than they think they do. And once they realize that, then they become more willing to make the changes. And very often it's just small changes. Again, it's also like planning, for example. You know, if you are in a work environment, for example, like let's say policemen, firemen, fire brigades, you know, frontline staff in, you know, medicals. Those are professions and industries where you know there's going to be a lot of you know that. However, those are sort of short periods of high intensity stress. Yeah. So the way that you would prepare and plan for that might be different to, for example, if you're a customer service agent and you are on the phone all day with customers and you have this constant adrenaline rushing through your body because there's constant stress being drip fed throughout the day. So the way you plan for that and the way you deal for that, again, would be different. But both scenarios comes back to planning around that. How do you respond? How do you know? So, you know, a lot of how we feel is also determined, like, you know, we were talking a moment ago about, you know, working hard all the time, 24/7, all this stress. So what is the, what's the word? The counter action to that? Because as you probably know, we have the stress response, which comes from our ancestors, where we have all the adrenaline and, you know, we react like without thinking in a flash. And so we have all these, exactly. And we have all this stress running through our body. The opposite of that is the relaxation response, which happens after the stressful event is finished and everything goes back to normal and we can feel relaxed. Now, in our modern day lives, that doesn't happen because we're constantly in that stress mode and those hormones are constantly, and that's what ends up making us ill, leading to mental health issues and also physical illness. So how do we activate the relaxation on a daily basis to help us stress response? And so what kind of things can we do? And of course we can do long things. For example, and you having recently been a student will know this, I'm sure, very well. So when you're a student and you're coming up to exams, right? Yeah. You have 3 or 4 weeks and late nights and it's all night and it's early mornings and it's no social life, no nothing. It's chip. Then you write your exams. And then what happens?
Nothing.
Then what happens? You have a break.
Yeah.
You have holidays, right? And you have time to recover and time to rejuvenate.
Yeah.
What about elite athletes? They train. They have their big performance. And what happens afterwards? They have the period of recovery. Yeah. But in business, it's check, all the time, nonstop. One project is finished, straight into the next one. And it's 24/7, 365 days a year. And we wonder why people get burnt out. So why do we not have plans in place whereby we know budgets are high stress periods for finance people? So, okay, during this period, this is how we deal with it. And then we have a break. On a daily basis at work, for example, we can take a short break throughout the day. Take a 5-minute break, you know, every hour, for example. Take a break. Everybody can do that. Everybody has 5 minutes. And it's creating those habits. Okay, I'm going to do a constructive pause. You know, what is a constructive pause? It's a 3-minute stop, taking a deep breath, maybe just writing down a few thoughts so you don't have to worry about them. Take another breath, get back to your work. Brilliant. Everybody can do that. on a daily basis. Make sure you have some time for yourself to do something that you enjoy, even if it's just 5 minutes. Like, for example, the ideal situation for me, for example, is to get up early, do my sports, my exercise, my meditation, and then, what I like to do lots of things together. So, for example, I like to go outside and get some fresh air. So I'll go for a run. Now you need social interaction, go for a run with a friend or a walk with a friend. Now you've already got 3 things done in one action.
Yeah.
So, but now I might not have time to do that every day. So what can I do that's less? So maybe instead of a half an hour run, I'll go for a 15-minute run. And instead of a 20-minute meditation, I'll do a 10-minute meditation. Okay, can't even do that today because it's too busy. All right, what is the minimum I can do? I can do some 5-minute squats. I can sit outside and have a cup of tea and do some gratitudes. So there's always something. Yeah. What is the minimum that you can do during stressful times when you can't do the ideal? And it's planning for that, and it's having those processes in place. And you can do that in the office, and you can do it at home, and you can do it anywhere. And we can all do it once we know how to do it, and once we train ourselves to do it.
I think like you might even go one step further, where you said if I can do it, but you might come up with like the minimum standard, how much time you actually have to have for yourself, that it's not negotiable, like even if it's like 30 minutes a day, because then I think like it might come down to your priorities and what you feel is more important. And many times we think everybody else is more important, but like what you said about getting up in the morning, that's usually what I tell people, is that when you get up in the morning and you do something for yourself, whatever you want to do, it can be anything. What you actually tell yourself is that you're important because you put yourself first. The first thing that you do in the day is you take care of yourself, or you do what you want to do. And then a lot of times, like during the day, something might come up by the evening time or like any time. But in the morning, most of the time, you will have time for yourself. So like that's what I call your selfish time. Like we all need our selfish time, and you have to make it non-negotiable, because if it's negotiable, then you at some point you will just stop doing it. You will stop finding time for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we see so much in business, in organizations. Everything is always, and so my dream would be to have every organization start your morning with many organizations, companies start the morning with a meeting. So start the morning with a meeting and do a quick check-in. Are you on top of your week? Do a 5-minute breathing exercise before you start the meeting, for example, where everybody can just chill, take a deep breath, get into a good place, and then you can start your meeting from a good place, And again, those are simple things that can be implemented immediately. Yeah. And I think the great thing about being in an organization, doing something like this as a team, is that when you're not on top of it, the others will be there to remind you, because we all get, we all get to that place where this is more important, and then we get out of that habit. Yeah. But when you're as a team, then there'll always be somebody to say, oh no, we need to do this first. Oh yes, okay, let's do this, to kind of keep us on top of it, so that it really becomes that it becomes a real habit. And once these things are habits and implemented, then they just become normal, like having the early morning meeting, or like having a coffee at lunchtime, or whatever other habits you might have. Yeah,
it's like part of the culture now.
Exactly.
If you don't do it, then something is wrong.
Exactly. And again, as I said, it's not, I don't think it's so much about being right or wrong. I think it's about, we're human. We all have times when, because we're busy, something else will become more important on that day. But then the next day, the other person will say, hey, Australia, we've got to do this now. And so they'll keep you on top of it because there's a team of you. There's always somebody that will keep that system in place, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What would you say is the importance of accountability? Because like, I think that's pretty much what we're talking about. And even like when I talk to people, when I work with their habits and things like that, it's not as much the habits themselves as it is them to sometimes keep them accountable, that, you know what, you didn't finish these habits. Like, you just remind them they have somebody that they know that sees what they're doing. It helps a lot.
It does. And it's just so much easier when you have somebody to do it with. You know, like, for example, going running. So, you know, for me, sometimes, you know, to get up in the morning, it's so much easier when my husband gets up first, and then, you know, I have to get up because, okay, he's going running. We decided we're going running. If I was on my own, I would probably go, oh, nah, couldn't be bothered. But he's up and he's like, come on, we're going running. And I'm like, oh, okay, off we go. On other days, it might be the other way around. So we decided we're going running, and I'll be like, come on, we're going running now. And he's like, oh, really? I'm like, yep, come on, off we go. And that, you know, so, and that makes it easier. So yes, I think that's kind of a bit like the accountability that you're talking about, having somebody there to push you a little bit on those days where you might not really feel like it.
Yeah. Do you know why it's hard for people maybe to push themselves, or what's the biggest challenge about it?
I can tell you something for me. When it's dark and cold, it's very hard to get up in the morning. But yeah, I mean, I think it's this thing about motivation. You know, you talk about intrinsic motivation and external motivation. You'll know all about those things. And then there's also, you know, if you watch the athletes now, there's this thing we call arousal control. I don't know if you learned about that, but, you know, having, again, routines around what fires you up. So sometimes in order to do something, and again, most athletes, I think almost all the elite athletes, they all have some kind of a routine that they do, whereby they program their mind and their body to do what they need to do. And they practice that and practice that and practice that until it's just, again, like we've been discussing, it just is normal, and it's part of, that is the start of their swim or their jump or their run, whatever it is. It won't happen without them getting themselves fired up, for example. So some people will jump up and down and really energize themselves, while other people might need to calm themselves down and take a deep breath and do some visualization. So again, it differs. And even for us individually, it may differ from day to day. Today, I might need to really fire myself up and get myself really going. Whilst tomorrow, I might be like, okay, just calm down a little bit. This is what I need today. So I think those are all factors that play a role in getting ourselves going, if that makes sense, in motivating ourselves and keeping going. And then, of course, also the goal. What is it that we want to achieve? How badly do I want that?
Yeah. What if the goal feels really far away? Like, you know, you want that goal, but you feel like you're so far away. Because like one thing that that I noticed within myself and other people that I have worked with is that a lot of times when it comes to even like building your habits, we look so much at how far we are from the goal that we forget to look at what actually is going to help us to get to the goal, which is what we do today. And like, that's where our focus is so much on what we don't have, that we forget that the only way to get there is by what we do today.
Absolutely. And that's a brilliant point, you know. And again, I kind of bring that back to my running, and I'm not a good runner. But when I'm running and I'm finding it really hard, I find that when I look at that long goal, I'm just like, oh, I can't do that. But when I go, okay, I just need to get to that next spot over there. And then I get to that next spot and I go, okay, I'll just go that little bit further. and I'll just go that little bit further, and then suddenly I get to the goal. So I find, and this is just for me, by looking at that long goal, it's too much. But when I have those short little goals that I can reach and I can achieve, and you know, even if I don't reach the long goal today, it doesn't matter. I've reached those shorter goals.
Yeah.
And so tomorrow I know I can get there, and I can get that bit further the next day. And so again, it comes to probably setting smaller goals on the one hand, and also taking those baby steps. Just do one thing at a time. And you know, we don't have to be perfect. We sometimes think we've got to be perfect, and we've got to do it all at once, and we've got to achieve it. You know, doing something is better than doing nothing. And that's, again, what we were talking about earlier, that minimum standard, that minimum thing. So, you know, I might have a day where I don't want to run, but I can walk.
Yeah.
And you know what? When I start walking, I usually start to run.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so it's just taking that step. And maybe on those days where you don't feel great, just do something. Even if it's just something small, like you said, just do something today and go, okay, I did this today. And you know what? If you don't do it today, you don't need to beat yourself up about it. You can say, okay, that didn't work out. Let's start again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then start again tomorrow and keep going. You know, a lot of people will, you know, for example, if you look at weight loss, and they'll be really, really good for a week, a month, whatever. And then they'll go, oh, now I've eaten a chocolate, I've eaten a cake. Oh, well, what's the point? I may as well eat more. So this is Sunday. And then comes Monday.
It's called. I was reading about it. There was a name, how this is, like how this approach is called, where there was a research where they were, people were on a diet, and then they would have people come in and they would offer them milkshakes. And if they would drink that milkshake, they would be like, you know what, I can just now go and eat whatever I want for the rest of the day, because now I failed with this. Like, even if they would just get milkshake and then just stick to their diet, they would be fine. But a lot of times what happens is that the moment you break, you're like, that's it. It's not worth it anymore. I can just go back to my old ways.
Exactly, because they think they've now failed. So they forget to see that all this good progress, and then they'll go, okay, well, I've had a piece of cake, I may as well have more, I may as well have more. And again, if that's just on Sunday and they start again on Monday, no, it doesn't really matter. The problem comes in when it starts in a Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and then they go back to all the old habits. And so, I think, you know, that's the important part about it. So, okay, so I had a cake today. What the heck?
Yeah.
I had a cake. Doesn't matter. Tomorrow is a new day, and I can just continue from where I left off.
Yeah.
And in the overall scheme of things, that slice of cake, or even that day of 2 cakes and a roast and or whatever else it was, won't really matter.
Yeah, there's a good rule by James Clear. He wrote the book Atomic Habits, and he said that he has a rule that you can skip a day, but it can't be 2 days, because now you're starting to build this bad habit again.
Exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the burnout, because I think that is something that so many people experience or have experienced. Like, is there a way how to see some signs that you're having it, or it's coming close, or like not like deal with it, but how you make sure you prevent it, that it doesn't happen in the first place?
Well, again, I think comes to all of these things that we've been speaking about. It's about first of all, being aware, knowing yourself, knowing your own limits. Like, for example, again, I can feel when things get too much, and then I have to say, okay, just stop, take a break, and then continue again, you know, whenever. And so it's really being aware of your own limits and your own self, if I can put it that way, and, you know, putting into place these things that we spoke about, you know, having having routines, having self-care strategies and tools, making yourself a priority to make sure that you have that time to come down, to relax, to clear your mind, to have time for yourself. Because it's when you don't have those things, that's what leads to the burnout. It's that 24/7, non-stop, constantly, always something to do, always more, always being available, never having time to even breathe. Those are the things that lead to burnout. So it's having the strategies to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, like what you said,
and there's lots of signs. It's the anxiety, it's the stress, it's the the self-medicating, the lack of sleep. All of those things are all indicators of burnout.
Yeah, like before when you were talking about firemen versus let's say business people, you said that there's a difference how you deal with those stresses, because one is like more intense and short term, but the other one is like more constant. What are the differences? Because I really like that concept that you said, because they're like the two different stresses, but like in what ways would the coping be different between them?
Well, if for example you are a police person that has moments of high intensity stress, it's a bit like the example I gave with the athletes and the exams. Yeah. So these are going to be periods of high stress. So during that high stress, of course, you do what you have to do. So it may be a week, it may be a month, it may be an hour. But afterwards, what are you going to do then? So once the stressful event is finished, what is your plan afterwards to have a time of recovery? So if you're, a police person and you have, and they might be spread out throughout the day because, you have an emergency here and then you have an emergency there and you have an emergency there. As an organization, how are you going to deal with those things? And then on an individual level, how are you going to do it? So what systems and what strategies are you going to have in place during, or let's say before, during, and after? So like, again, the athlete or the student, before you do your training. So you do your training, you do your breathing, you do your visualization, you do whatever processes you decide to do. During the event, you're in action mode. You're just doing whatever you need to do. However, having practiced, obviously, like, you've trained for this, so now you're training the other thing, you'll be in a better place while you're doing that. And then afterwards, you want to activate the relaxation response. Okay. So whether that's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, a day, a week, whatever, it all depends on the situation and the organization. So, but those are things that would then be planned with each organization on an individual level. Yeah. And it's the same, if you've got this constant stress throughout the day because you're a customer service person, again, preparing for your day. During the day, you do your stuff, but during the day, again, you can do things like a short breathing exercise, taking short breaks, doing short visualizations, doing affirmations, all of these little things that you can just pop in throughout the day. Mm-hmm. And then making sure your day ends at a specific time. And then what are you going to do after your day to make sure that you can recover?
Yeah. So like with the peaks, it's more like the recovery afterwards. And with the constant, you just have to be consistent throughout the day as well as at the end of the day.
Exactly.
I think big challenge is actually calming down or winding down at the end of the day, because a lot of times we still have ideas, we still are solving problems, because in business there's always something to do. You never finish something in one day and next day you start again. Like, what are good ways how to maybe deal with that? Because I myself sometimes have had times when I just go to sleep and I just keep thinking. So like, is there like a way how to manage that or cope with that or deal with that? Because I know a lot of people that have this or have been talking about this, because it isn't like, sometimes it's hard for us to consciously just switch off the brain.
But you can. That's the great thing about it.
Okay.
You can. And it's about training your brain to do so, training yourself to do so. So, the thing I would say about that really is, at the end of the day, and again, it's about developing that habit, developing that routine. At the end of the day, write down those things. Before you close your computer or whatever, just write down a note of what it is you need to do tomorrow and a couple of those ideas, because by writing them down, you don't have to keep them in your brain. So they don't have to keep going round. What's happened here? Can you see me?
Yeah.
You have to say, okay, you're back. So by writing them down, you don't have to keep recycling them in your brain. And so when you start thinking about them, you can literally tell yourself, that's okay, you don't need to worry about that. You can deal with that tomorrow. So you can literally tell your brain and train your brain to, you know what? I've written it down. It's over there. We'll deal with it tomorrow. And every time that thought comes in, you tell your brain, don't worry about it. We'll do that tomorrow. Don't worry about it. We'll do that tomorrow. So you train your brain to stop thinking about it because you're safe. It's again, and it's that, talking back about anxiety, it's that fear that, you're going to forget.
Yeah.
So, but now you're not going to forget because you've written it down, so you're safe. So you can tell your brain, you know what, it's okay, we're safe, it's fine.
When you write down that your brain actually perceives it as finished tasks, so it stops thinking about it just because you wrote it down.
Exactly, because it knows that it's still there. Yeah. It's kind of like you're telling your brain, it's okay, you're safe, you're fine, we don't have to worry, you don't have to be afraid, we're safe, it's there. So yeah, my suggestion for that would be, at the end of the day, write down those things, and then when those thoughts start to come in, literally tell your brain, because it's your brain is trying to protect you.
Yeah.
So just tell your brain, don't worry about it, we'll sort it out tomorrow. Don't worry, sort it out tomorrow, it's fine. Now we're going to do this, or now we're going to sleep, or now we're going to do whatever.
Yeah.
All is well. So you just train your brain into that.
Yeah, like I was even reading about like even having triggers at the beginning of workday and the end of the workday that are signaling that, okay, we have finished the job, like we are not going to work anymore. But I think it's really important when you build that habit to actually stick to the fact that after you finish and you do these habits, you don't get back to working later on.
Exactly. And that's why it's also so important to really create boundaries. So, one of the things about working from home is that it's so easy to just, I'll just quickly do this because I've got nothing better to do. Oh, I'll just quickly hop in and because I've got, so really creating those boundaries and saying, no, work is work. And after work, there's no more work. I'm going to do something else. And again, even, when you're working in an office, to really have that cut-off time and that separation between work and free time.
Yeah.
Very important.
How do you, I think many times people might feel pressure when they set those boundaries, or maybe feel guilt that they are used to always being available, or that people will start thinking something bad about them. Like, how can you deal with that?
You don't need to be rude.
Well,
yeah. But you can start slowly by setting those boundaries. And again, I think it's perhaps for some companies and some organizations, it's, creating that culture of it's weekend, after weekend, on the weekend, I'm not answering business calls. Sorry. Or after 5 o'clock, I'm not answering business calls. I'm not answering emails. And yeah, it can be really difficult at first because, you know, we have this fear that we're going to lose our job or somebody's going to be annoyed with us. And so it's practicing and starting perhaps with smaller things and then building up to get people used to that change, if that makes sense.
Do you think that,
and also self to know that, you know what, I'm not going to, you know, if I don't answer this call now, nobody's going to die.
Yeah.
If I don't answer this email now, nobody's going to die.
Yeah.
Nothing, you know, I can't do anything at 8-9 o'clock at night because nobody's available. But tomorrow morning, first thing, 8 o'clock, whenever 9 o'clock, that's when I can do something about it. And that's when I will deal with it.
Yeah.
And people start to get used to that, you know.
Yeah.
If they know you don't answer your phone, they're not going to bother to phone you anymore because there's no point. You're not going to answer.
Yeah. I think like that's the challenge, is that transition. But like, do you think there's any link between setting boundaries and maybe the person's self-esteem? Because I think many times, like when you might not be that confident within yourself, or maybe not even see yourself as important, you just keeping yourself, like you keep yourself available to everybody, and you might not value yourself as much because everybody's more important and you always have to be available.
Of course, absolutely. People, you know, they are people pleasers. They want to keep the peace. They want to keep everybody happy. And that's absolutely, you know, it takes a real change in themselves, and they need to work on building that self-esteem and building that confidence so that they can actually stand up and say, I'm sorry, I'm not taking that call.
Yeah.
You know, or when they get confronted about it, they can say, sorry, you know, I don't take calls at 8 o'clock at night because I'm busy with my family at that time. You know, you don't have to be rude about it, but it does take, for a lot of people, it does take work on themselves first because they don't have the confidence to do that, for sure.
Yeah, like I'm recovering people pleaser, so I know the feeling, because at first it was really challenging, but even the fact that I read somewhere that people treat you the way you teach them to treat you. So if, like as you said, if you teach them that I'm not available after this hour, they just learn that with time. Like at the beginning, they might not be happy with that. You might feel some resistance. And I think that's where a lot of times people that are like people pleasers, they might give in and they go back to the old ways. But if you still stuck with that first phase when you feel that resistance from everybody else, with time, they just get used to that. And they just know, okay, we can't reach you after this hour or before this hour. And they're just okay with that. It's like a rule.
Exactly. And, you know, and sometimes it's, you know, you might need to be a little bit more explicit about it. And sometimes you can just train them without saying anything. That would be my preferred way, because I also have to be one of those people.
Yeah.
So, you know, I will just very quietly try and do my thing, as it were. But yeah, it takes practice and, you know, building of confidence, and it's like building that confidence muscle.
Yeah.
And like with everything, the more we do it, the better we get at it.
Yeah, the more you get used to it, like, and I think it's like that with everything. The more you practice it, the better you get at it, and at some point it just becomes a norm.
Absolutely. Exactly.
It's crazy how much a person can change when they actually put in that like continuous, consistent practice of doing those things.
Absolutely. And it comes back down to priorities. You know, how important is this to me? How important is it to me to make that change?
Yeah.
Because if that's a priority, you'll do it. If it's not, you won't.
What would you say when people say it is important to me, but they don't really take any action towards it? Because there are many people like that. They know it's important to do this or that, or take care of their health, or set boundaries, but I still end up not doing it.
I think it's always a case of when the pain, whatever the pain is, becomes more than the gain, then you'll take action. For example, a few years ago, I was diagnosed with food intolerances and stuff like that. And I was having a lot of pain in my body. And it was just before we were going to go on holiday to Germany for the summer. And I was like, I wasn't allowed to eat any gluten. I wasn't allowed to eat any dairy. Dairy wasn't such a big deal. But the gluten, because I love the German bread. Oh my gosh, it's just amazing. my favorite thing is just a plain slice of fresh bread with butter. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I? And I have a very sweet tooth, so I love to have chocolates and stuff. Like, how am I going to do this? It's going to be really hard. But I knew that I was in so much pain that I needed to do this. So I literally cut out everything. And every time I wanted something, I would go in my mind, well, what can I have instead? And that shift in mindset, what can I have instead, was huge for me. It's such a small thing, but it was huge, because every time I would go for something that I shouldn't have, I'd stop myself, I'd go, what can I have? And so by the time I had the stuff that I can, I didn't want the stuff that I didn't have. And I actually found it really, really easy. It wasn't nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be. And very quickly, it just became my norm. And so it's when you make that decision and you really want to do it, I believe, then you will do it. And that's why I said to you just now about priorities. If you really want it, if you want to make the change, you will, because that is your priority, because it's important to you for whatever reason, whether that's a physical pain, an emotional pain, whatever the pain is, that is now bigger and it's becoming a problem in your life, and you will then do something about it. So, it's when people come and they say they know it's important and whatever, you cannot change anybody else. You cannot tell anybody what to do. You can advise them, you can educate them, but in the end, only you can change you, because you want to. Nobody else can do that. I cannot control your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Only you can do that. And so when it comes to people like that, then they're probably just not ready to do it, or it's not enough of an issue in their lives to make the change.
Yeah, like even what you said, like I was thinking about the question that you asked, what can I have instead? I was thinking first about the self-control that you must have had not to take it. But at the same time, I think even more powerful thing was the fact that you shifted your perspective away from what you can have towards, in a way, coming up with answer, what can I have instead, where you, in a way, you can even create like a game out of it, where you might not even have to have that much self-control, because I think self-control is more like, I can't have it, so I just make sure I don't have it. But instead you didn't even focus at what you couldn't have, but you shifted towards like that perspective. And I think that's when you have to spend less like self-control or like willpower, and you in a way even make it like more enjoyable, but also easier when it comes to like self-control, because it's pretty limited research in general. So that was like really interesting thing that I was thinking about as you were talking, that self-control, but it wasn't as much that you were controlling as you just shifted and you made it pretty easy.
Exactly. Absolutely. And what was I going to say now? And also coming back to what we were saying earlier about having a plan. So I always had something that was healthy, that I like, that I could go for. So instead of going for a slice of bread with butter or a piece of chocolate, I will go for a bit of roast vegetables, which I love. I love roast vegetables. So it's not difficult. but I make sure I have them there. So every morning, what I would do, I'm not doing it at the moment, but at that time, every morning, I would put a sweet potato or a butternut or something like that in the oven, or I would have roast potatoes not roast potatoes, roast vegetables from the previous evening's dinner. And so when I felt like I wanted something, that's what I'd go for.
Yeah. Yeah,
and it comes,
I think it's even
back
like
to the other things that we were talking about as well, having a plan.
Yeah. And I think even like with when people want to change, like if you can't find time to actually work on that change, you probably will never change.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, again, it's how much do we want that?
Yeah.
And how willing are we to put in the work to make it happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. This conversation I really enjoyed it. And I think like we could talk forever about so many topics.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I can talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah, me too. We might have you on another time and have another conversation, because I think like there's so many topics to cover, even like when it comes to mental health itself. So like a lot of things. Maybe before we finish off, I started doing this some time ago. Is there like, what wisdom would you want to leave us with?
What wisdom would I want to leave you with? I think, thinking of the conversation that we've just had, I would say that in reality, whatever it is that you want, if you really want it, you can achieve it and you can do it.
Yeah.
You just have to really want it. And having that mind shift of what can I do rather than what can't I do is huge.
Yeah, I love it. And that's so true. All right. Okay. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I've really enjoyed it very much as well. So I look forward to the next time.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.